What happens when the very thing you value most, like loyalty, starts suffocating you instead of supporting you? Today, we're going to talk about the moment when loyalty has to evolve into integrity and how choosing your truth over obligation is the most sovereign act you'll ever take. Hey, I'm Dawn Algan, contrarian soul guide and spiritual mentor, and you're watching Sovereignty Rising, the YouTube edition. Today, we're talking about when one of your core values, like loyalty, stops serving you and needs to evolve into something higher, like integrity. So let's begin by chatting about values. Because for myself, whenever I'm doing any coaching work or talking with people, this is always the place that we want to begin. Values are like our own personal North Stars. And so instead of just having one, we get our own unique constellation. And when we can figure out what is valuable to us, our values, and when we can align with them, then we can completely follow and be on the right track for our own life. And values are not only valuable to ourselves, they're valuable to our relationships. They're valuable to our ability to share and create intimacy with those around us. And so for some people, they think of their values as being very private. And often we feel this way when we have gone through some sort of traumatic relationship where people have gaslit us or used our values against us. In healthy relationships, values are a phenomenal conversation. It allows us to understand each other, to understand what's important to each other. Because although we might align in many of our values, some values are going to be different. And understanding what somebody else's values are allows us to treat them with respect and honor what's important to them while still honoring what's important to us. So back when I first started, I was listening to Brene Brown's work, Dare to Lead. I love her work. And in that, she talked about values. I'd never really thought about them before that book. And she says that we really want to narrow them down to 3 core values. And those 3 core values will encompass all of the other ones. So usually if we can shift it down to about 3, that'll work. Now, my work as a spiritual director, as a spiritual coach, instead, I like to work with about 5 to 6. I find that it gives us a broader understanding, especially when we're dealing with relationships, such as not only personal relationships, in romantic relationships, with family, and with work. And so I find by understanding the core of about 5, sometimes we can get them down to 3, but about 5 will give us a broader understanding and give us a more clearly defined, well, like I said, personal constellation that we can follow. When I started doing Brene Brown's work, it began with freedom, courage, and living wholeheartedly. And the last one was like the goal of what I wanted to get to. As I started to expand and to evolve, grow, and uncover, really it's about letting things go. I think of it less as a healing journey and a lot more of a releasing journey. So as I began this journey, they shifted. Freedom a couple of years ago began to shift, to evolve, maybe even to mature into sovereignty. Freedom was one of my core values when I was still living in a life of survival. And freedom was part of that. It was me saying, I don't like to feel trapped. I don't want to feel like I'm being controlled by anything. When I expanded into sovereignty and started to explore the word kept coming up in dreams, in conversations and meditations. And so I started to explore the word, and the word meaning to be self-governing, to no longer be pushed and pulled by our fears, our worries, our concerns, by the dramas and traumas of the past and our anxiousness about the future, but to be completely present, to be with ourself, our higher self, and to let that govern our life. And so freedom evolved into sovereignty. Within sovereignty, that also began to encapsulate to live wholeheartedly. Courage remains as one of my absolute key values in my life. As I started to explore and get to know myself better, I began to understand that I had other values that were important to me. And when I had given up on them, they really threw my life into turmoil, into chaos. One of those being intuition. The more I explored being in attune with my intuition and stopped having to rationalize or overthink things or take somebody else's opinion, I started to get back into alignment with myself. So intuition became one of my values, one of the things that would help me stay in complete attunement with myself. So courage, sovereignty, and intuition started to come heavily into play. Over the last 3 years, I've had three others show up. So one is respect. Now, it was not a value that I understood about myself. It was actually a trigger that helped me understand it and a friend that pointed it out. And so respect began as something I didn't realize, but when I felt disrespected, I was often triggered. And so often where we're trying to place boundaries on people or where we feel like people have offended us, that will let us know that there's a value there that we need to uncover. Another value of mine is curiosity. Now, this came from actually my business partner and her constant curiosity of asking deeper and deeper questions. And when I started to explore it, it started to help me move away from expectations and judgments and get me more in tune with myself. That curiosity led me into compassion and to have the courage to be curious as opposed to being defensive with my expectations and judgments allowed me to cultivate deeper connections and relationships with those around me. Now, forever, I always knew that one of my values was loyalty. And it was one that I struggled with, one that I would put in and then take out, put in and then take out. And part of it was because I was always a loyalist, but I also knew that it threw me out of balance a lot. And so recently, this year specifically, I made my word of the year. If you haven't watched, I did a YouTube on this, on picking a word for the year instead of setting intentions. And so my word for this year was alignment, and to consistently, if not constantly, stay in alignment with myself, to keep coming back to center. So back in January, my mother passed away. And shortly thereafter, a book came into my sphere called The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. And this is how a lot of things shift and happen for me. So this book came into my sphere. I listened to it. I thought, oh, that was a good book. And then I got this feeling like I wasn't done with it yet. And so I picked the book back up, listened to it for a second time, and some of the answers of the questions I'd been asking. I was looking for clarity. I'd been feeling really anxious since before my mom passed away. And I was like, why am I feeling this anxiousness? I need clarity. I need clarity. Something's off. Something doesn't feel right. And I'd been doing a ton of learning and expanding in my business, and things just weren't quite clicking the way that I needed them to for myself. And so as I kept asking for clarity, this book started to answer some questions for me. And one of the questions it answered was really about my role, the way that I show up in this world is my purpose. And what came through was Contrarian Soul Guide. And it started from this book. And as I was listening, I listened to it probably 10 times over, trying to absorb, are you really telling me that I'm a contrarian soul guide? And the second part of that is a spiritual coach. And I began to understand that the contrarian soul guide was about me, my own unique way of being, my personality, that I push people to their edge and purposely to help people break through their upper limits. And so the contrarian soul guide part was about me honoring my own personality and not needing to be like other spiritual coaches, other spiritual teachers, that I could just be my own unique self, which is to look like this. I don't need to wear flowing garb. I don't need to be like anybody else. I could just be me. And then that led me to coming forward with creating Sovereignty Rising, the podcast, expanding and shifting my YouTube page, and really starting to adjust my work. I'd already created Aligned Living, and then it pushed me into creating a second program of Soul Alchemy. And when I say creating, it's always about this downloading, this co-creation with the universe. And so why I'm telling you all of this is because the word integrity kept coming up. And one of the things I don't like to ever do is like copy people or be a follower. So I was really resistant to this word. I was intrigued by it. And yet at the same time, I didn't want it to be like I was following anybody else. So I kept thinking about integrity. And then over the last couple of weeks, we'd had a bunch of shifts and changes come. I also own a clinic, and we had a bunch of shifts and changes start to come up. And although intuitively I knew they were for the best, they were what was needed for our business to expand to become what it needs to be, I was really struggling with this loyalty. Loyalty all of a sudden came up. And I was noticing my irritation and my frustration with people. And it was loyalty that was sitting there. And as I was staring at it, I was like, this value is not right. There's something that's just not like I've always been a loyalist. And there's times it's been great and there's times it's been bad. And so as I started to listen to my business partner, who's one of my closest friends, talk about integrity, and she was talking about the lack of integrity that some people were showing up with. And all of a sudden, as I was listening to her, I was like, this is it. The word's not loyalty. The word has always been integrity. And when I'm not in integrity with myself, but I'm being loyal to something, whether that's a person, a belief, a situation, it's what throws me out of alignment. And so I realized it's not loyalty for me, it's integrity. And when I'm in integrity, then trust, honesty, respect, loyalty, those all come together underneath it. And so integrity all of a sudden needed to shift. And that is what brought us into this talk today. I want to really invite you to begin to reflect and explore. If you already know your values, then bring them back out. I encourage my clients to look at their values and let's re-talk about the values on a regular basis, because has the meaning behind them shifted? Is respect still the same thing? Are we using it not only in the way that we are handling our relationships with other people, but are we also using them for ourselves? Because our values are about us. So I invite you to really reflect on whether or not your values are still right for you, or are they outdated? Do they need to shift? Do they need to mature? Do they need to evolve as you do? So let's define loyalty first in a grounded way. What does loyalty look like when it's in its positive, when it's in its light? And so often loyalty is more about our relationships. So even in a grounded way, it's our loyalty to our family, to our friends, to beliefs. And it can be a good thing. It can be good in terms of it keeps us supporting. It keeps us showing up. And that's positive. It helps us prioritize connection. It helps us think of somebody else outside of ourselves. And there's times we simply need to do it. We are the center of our own world. And sometimes we need to serve. Loyalty, when used correctly, when we're in attunement, when we're in alignment with ourselves, can be a really powerful and beautiful thing. But there's also the shadow side of loyalty. Loyalty can bind us to relationships, jobs, communities, even ideas and beliefs that no longer match who we are, that no longer match our growth cycle. Instead of cultivating connection, it can actually create attachment. It can make us stay long after it was time for us to move on. And where on its light side, loyalty can prioritize connection, on its shadow side, it can often be at the cost of ourselves. Now, as I said, I have been a loyalist in my life. And when I've looked back, I've seen how often it has hurt me as opposed to supported me. And there's plenty of examples of this. Staying in romantic relationships long after I should have left. Staying in friendships where I was definitely not treated with love and respect. Even in jobs. One of the most difficult times for me was before I got hurt. About 8 years ago, I was in a couple of car accidents. And before that, I was in lighting and interior design. And I loved my job. And I was really good at it. And I was well paid. And my ego was very, very well fed. And beyond that, My bosses, my mentor, were phenomenal. I worked for this company for 17 years, and they were amazing to me. Supportive when I became a single mom, supportive as I got my feet under me, built my first home, and really started to spread my wings. They were there for me through everything. And then one day I started to feel less satisfied. I was getting more irritated with people. I was struggling because from the outside, my life looked amazing. And inside, my question that kept coming was, is this it? And that was really hard for me. I was loyal to my company. They had been so good to me. How could I possibly think of leaving? And yet, every single coach that I went to, every spiritual advisor, they all kept saying the same thing to me. You're not supposed to be doing what you're doing. You're supposed to be coaching. And I was a hard pass. So here I was trying to stay in something that didn't feel like it fit anymore and feeling extraordinary amounts of guilt and shame because I knew it wasn't right, but I just couldn't figure out how to leave. What was interesting is I remember talking to my bosses after I got hurt. After about 6 months, I was put on long-term disability and pulled completely out of work with a traumatic brain injury and nervous system dysregulation. And the craziest part was I was incredibly light sensitive. So I went from being in light all the time to if I started to try to go to work, within 30 minutes, all the lights in the lighting showroom would need to be turned off. So obviously it wasn't working anymore. I remember I had coffee with one of my bosses who was my mentor, and I was in tears. I felt so freaking bad that I couldn't stay. And I remember him saying to me, Dawn, loyalty isn't staying when it's time to move on. Loyalty is about how you move on. And that really made me think, made me pause. Here I was thinking loyalty was staying no matter what. I was living in the shadow side of loyalty, when real loyalty is treating people with respect. Maybe it does mean moving on, but you do it with absolute love and you still honor and cherish everything else while you still continue on your journey. Loyalty is powerful, but can really become a leash if it's misused. Now let's talk integrity. Think of it as inner alignment, thought, word, action, all matching truth, because that is what integrity is. It is complete alignment with your truth, no matter what. It means when lying would make it easier on everybody and just get things moving along, it means holding your ground and getting really uncomfortable and leaning in. Where loyalty might mean I stay no matter what, integrity would mean stay when it's right, and I leave respectfully when it's not. Where loyalty can really cling to our history, to the past. It'll say, but we've been through so much. We've had all this time together. Integrity asks, does this match whom I am becoming? Integrity doesn't really bend. It's a compass. It really helps direct, no matter who's around, no matter their opinions, no matter what anybody else might think, say, or do. And where loyalty will serve a relationship, integrity serves truth. Loyalty might prioritize the connection, which might even become more of an attachment, whereas integrity prioritizes alignment, which really deepens the connection because it's honest. It's a solid foundation. Now, on its shadow side, it demands courage, boundaries, and being misunderstood. So it's not that it itself can be there, but often this is where the curiosity comes in. So sometimes when we're in integrity and like, this is my truth, we can get really rigid. We can also become somewhat judgmental. And so when we really want to get in integrity from a spiritual side, this is when we start coming into the characteristics of our soul. We start leaning into curiosity so that we can get courageous in having these conversations. But we can also get curious about what's happening for the other person or for the others in a situation, rather than necessarily judging me versus them. If I were to leave, say, an institution or a belief, a religion, I would be able to leave and say, it's just not fitting right for me anymore. I don't need to make them all demons and bad. I can just simply say, this just doesn't fit, and wish every other person absolute love with respect. So integrity on its shadow side can get a little rigid. It can get where we get judgmental. We want to make sure that we're coming into it with that with courage and curiosity, which allows us to hold and stand even when we're being misunderstood. Even if somebody else is screaming, "You're not like us anymore," we can stand there and go, "Yeah, I know. It sucks. And I love you anyways." And then we walk away. And we can see this especially in relationships where we have people pleased. When we start getting into integrity with ourselves, we stop saying yes when what we mean is no. We stop selling ourselves out. It's not that we stop doing things for other people. It's not that we stop caring or any of those things. But when we do them, it's because we truly want to do them, not because we think we have to do them. Integrity isn't about loyalty to others. It's about loyalty to your soul. Now, when we're looking at them side by side, we can think of external versus internal. Loyalty is often about others, whereas integrity is about self-alignment. Loyalty says stay, where integrity says stay only when it's true. In past versus future, loyalty clings to history, whereas integrity asks what's aligned now in this eternal moment. Conditional versus absolute. Loyalty changes often with circumstances, whereas integrity doesn't bend. In relationships versus truth, loyalty prioritizes that attachment, whereas integrity prioritizes authenticity and allows the deeper connection with the relationship to follow. So why do our values shift? Expansion really equals refinement. As we evolve, what once served us, what once kept us safe, starts to feel like it's holding us back. It starts to feel like it's locking us down or chaining us in. And where loyalty may be served, belonging and safety, this feeling of security, of being loved, it tends to be conditional. And where it really served us in one season, we need to understand that when we're in integrity, it serves our truth and our sovereignty in this one that we're expanding into. The thing is growth really exposes our values, that we're really just stepping stones towards higher truth. This is why I love values so much. When we look at them and we keep re-looking at them, and we don't just like, oh yeah, I know my values, I check them off, but we really, like I say to clients all the time, I want you to keep your values, write them on a sticky note, keep them in your wallet, put them in your phone, put them everywhere, and ask yourself, am I in alignment with these values? Use them with every single question in every relationship. Is this relationship, or who I am in this relationship, am I in alignment with all of my values? Am I treating myself with respect and not just the other person? Am I being in integrity? Am I being honest? Am I being truthful? Am I trusting my intuition, or am I covering it up for the popular vote? And these are things that values give us. They give us this ability to get really, really grounded in ourself. Instead of looking for safety and security outside of ourselves, we start looking for it inside ourselves. That's what we were always meant to be. When we are in integrity with ourselves, we get to use these values as ways to get closer and closer to home. And so, as I said in the beginning, where my values were freedom, courage, and to live wholeheartedly, they started to shift, and shifting is good. Shifting is not bad. And when we pick, say, 5 values, it's not like we're saying all the other values don't matter. It's just saying that if I am keep these 5, all of the things I'm asking, these 5 have to be in alignment. I'll be on the right path. It's a beautiful thing to know ourselves, to understand where we're moving. And when one of them starts to feel like something's off, then we get to explore it to get a deeper clarity about ourselves. And that's important. The characteristics of our soul are courage, compassion, curiosity, caring, connectedness, clarity, calm, and creativity. If you think of it from that point of view, these values should always be bringing us closer to that space. Those are the characteristics of our soul, and our values should be gently guiding us towards that space. Peace is our natural state of beingness. Everything else that pulls us away from that might be normal in this world, but it's not natural. So here's the reflection question. What values guided your younger self that no longer fit who you are today? How do you know it's time for a shift? So, signs that loyalty is outdated. You feel resentment, but you keep showing up. You override your intuition because of your history. And you stay because leaving would look bad. So often we stay because it can also be terrifying. There's a sense of belonging where we've been. Again, 4 things that are the main driving force to our behaviors, our actions. And that's safety, belonging, security, and love. And so it can be really difficult to shift and move away from a relationship, to move out of a job that you have had because it doesn't fit anymore. But those have been your people. I promise you, it is extremely difficult to walk away from all the people that I'd considered pretty much family. What was the hardest part was once I was no longer at my old job, most of those people, their life went on still at that job. And so we drifted apart. It can be hard letting people go. It doesn't mean that it's forever. And it doesn't mean it needs to be on bad terms. There doesn't have to be anger and resentment and all the rest. None of that is necessary. We can just shift. And when we see them again, feel incredible amounts of love and excitement to recatch back up. And the same thing goes for our friends. It doesn't always have to be the bad breakup. It can simply be a shifting and a slipping away. Personally, I love courageous conversations. And so that when we're not fitting anymore, both parties know this just isn't working. And that's okay. We've just grown apart for now. And our paths might cross again sometime down the road. And for some relationships, let's be honest, they're dysfunctional. You might as well let them go now. So what are the signs that integrity is calling? Well, you crave freedom more than belonging. And I would even say you really crave belonging to you more than belonging to other people. And that's where freedom really lies. You want to choose yourself without guilt. It's okay. It's okay to say, you know what? This just isn't resonating for me. I love that for you, but I don't love that for me. These things are okay. It is imperative that we treat ourselves with love and respect. All the things that we've been craving from outside ourselves, safety, security, belonging, and love, are the things that we desire most within. Another sign is we can feel really heavy and dense in old dynamics. And we feel light and expansive, excited when we imagine or visualize choosing differently. So take a moment and just reflect. Where in your life are you practicing loyalty at a cost of integrity? And what would integrity choose for you right now, in this moment? without worries, without concerns about others, what would integrity choose for you in this moment, right now? And what value has evolved for you over the years? And what's the deeper truth underneath it? Here's the thing. Loyalty isn't wrong. It served us. But integrity is what carries us into sovereignty. I'd love to hear your reflections. Drop a comment about where you're shifting your values right now. If this video spoke to you, hit like and subscribe. It helps us grow this sovereignty revolution together. And share it with someone you know who's wrestling with their own values. And if you want to take this deeper, grab the free values worksheet. I'll link it below so that you can explore your values and to explore where your values are asking you to evolve. This is what sovereignty looks like, living in integrity with your soul. Remember, I see the light in you, and it is freaking brilliant. I so badly want you to see it too. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.